And I remember 2 weeks before I came back, she was like, "How are you feeling about going back to work?" And I burst into tears. I was like, I want to go back. I miss that part of myself. I miss seeing my clients. I miss seeing my team. I miss leaving the house. But at the same time, I don't want to leave this little baby.
Hello, hello. This is Samantha Saxby, and I am here with Molly, who is married with a 5-month-old son. Is he 5 months old right now, or is he older now?
He turned 6 months old on Sunday, so
Ah,
2 days ago.
what a milestone. Okay. So 6 months old. So exciting. And Molly is a doctor of physical therapy in an out of network sports medicine and performance facility. And she really loves being a working mom. And so we have a lot of things to talk about today. We're going to talk about daycare. We're going to talk about being on a small team and what that means when you need to take leave and the impact to your finances that she's experienced. And then we're going to talk about postpartum recovery from her perspective as a healthcare provider. So, lots of fun things to talk about. So, Molly, thank you so much again for being here. And so, I want to kick it off to you first and just a general question. What excites you about being a working mom?
Well, a lot excites me about being a working mom. But one of the things I'm most excited about is for my son to see a mom who's out there kicking butt in a traditionally male dominated industry, and especially a very specific subset of that industry. I mean, sports medicine is relatively niche to begin with, and then being out of network on top of that is very niche. And you don't see a lot of women in the space in general, and definitely not working moms. So I feel very honored to be able to continue with this stage of my career and to have a workspace that's been really supportive of me being a working mom. And I'm very excited for my son to see that I can do it all with certain concessions all the way around.
Yeah, we always have that air quotes of the do it all.
Yes,
'Cause there's only so much we can do, but I hear
exactly.
you. So, follow-up question, when you were expecting, did you feel like you always knew you wanted to return to paid work, or did that change in your mind at all throughout the experience? Like, talk to me about that.
Well, I've always been very dedicated to my career. I love what I do. So I never thought that I would want to transition out of the workspace, but I was also, going into it, I was like, this is an entirely new experience. I do not know what to expect. Like, we might get there and I might feel completely differently. At the same time, knowing that we were not in a financial position for me to stay at home. So, returning to work was always a part of the plan. But then, of course, you're on maternity leave, you have this tiny baby, your 12 weeks are almost up, and you're sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I going to leave my child? And I have a very, very good client turned friend who's in her early 50s. I've worked with her kids who are college age, and she actually visited me every single week of my maternity leave, would bring me lunch, hang out. And I remember 2 weeks before I came back, she was like, "How are you feeling about going back to work?" And I burst into tears. I was like, I want to go back. I miss that part of myself. I miss seeing my clients. I miss seeing my team. I miss leaving the house. But at the same time, I don't want to leave this little baby. And how do I do both? Fortunately, the transition back was a little easier for me because we did not start daycare right away. We kind of had a situation with my husband transitioning into a new role with a new company. And so he was able to take some time off, as well as family, friends were able to kind of bridge a gap. And so my son didn't start daycare until he was 5 months old. So I had 2 months to get back to work, get back into the swing of things, and not have to leave my baby with a stranger, which, we love our daycare provider. But in the beginning, it's like, we've met a few times. We think you're wonderful, but you're still a stranger that I'm leaving my baby with until we build that relationship. And so that was certainly helpful. And when I got back in the office after those first few days, like, the leaving him was hard, but when I was back in the office, I was so happy, and I felt like I found a part of myself that I had been missing when I was home. So it's very bittersweet, but I am very happy to be back to work and really kind of filling my cup in that way.
So, there's a lot there that I wanna go deeper. So you talk about the concept of, like, having a stranger watch your kids, and I resonate with that. So my son is just turned 10 months, and we were able to, very privileged with lots of family around, and so we had grandparents, a revolving door of grandparents
Mhm.
helping us, and so he just started daycare, like, 4 days ago, and boy, I was like, it was emotional. I had to emotionally prepare myself. I had to emotionally like think about it. And that the phrase of like a stranger, like I of 100% childcare providers are so amazing at what they do, and so it's not a slight to them. It's just it feels like there's this pressure that I'm not the one raising my baby, and it feels like I'm abandoning them, and I don't know, like, do you resonate with that? Like, what was your emotional journey, and how did you overcome that in knowing that daycare was a great place for your child to be part-time or full or, what you consider part-time or full-time?
Mhm. He's there full time. It was definitely a transition. I thought that the hardest part was going to be just leaving him every day, and so I was like, "Oh, I'm so used to this. I've been leaving him, every weekday for 2 months at this point. Like, I'm gonna be totally fine when I dropped him off." And I was until I got in the car, and then I started bawling because I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, what if he's not okay? She doesn't know him. She doesn't know his routines." And I'd sent, a lengthy email with everything in it. And then at the end, put in the caveat of, this is what we're doing. I understand that in a multi child setting, this probably isn't super realistic. So, like, go with it, and do whatever you need to do. And it is hard, like, knowing that he is spending most of his waking hours with another adult. But at the same time, I think it's good for him to be around other kids. Like, I see how tired he is at the end of the day. So I like know he's been stimulated and he's just observing and learning and doing so much, which is really exciting. And fortunately, our daycare provider, she gives us like updates throughout the day and we have like a really good handoff routine. So I feel like I still know how his day is going and what he did, and all of that. And so that is very helpful. Like, yes, I wish that I could be there for every minute of the day, but at the same time, I want to be at work during the day too. And I understand that in my setting, I cannot do both. It is not realistic for me to, I'm working with a client. It's not realistic for me to be having my kid with me the whole time as much as I wish I could do that. But it's nice that our daycare provider is really doing an excellent job of keeping us filled in so we don't feel like we're missing out on anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I also look at it of like daycare providers have a talent and a love for children and they are experienced in a way that I'm not. And
Yep.
so they're able to provide a unique value, probably a unique set of patients, a unique engagement level that know works with different age kids.
Hmm.
And, as someone who hasn't really spent a lot of time with babies, toddlers, like that is so invaluable to me. So the first day my son came home from daycare, I swear to God, he looked like he was a 5-year-old. And I was like, oh my
What
God,
happened?
you have aged in like 8 hours. And so and I just felt like he did. He's like watching the older kids and learning things. And so I just knew in my gut, I'm like, okay, he's ready for this. And that means, mama needs to be ready for this. So
Yep, yep, for sure. Yeah, those daycare ladies, I mean, or men, they've got some sort of magic to them.
yeah,
Going into our first week, we've been working on getting him to kind of settle himself for naps, and at bedtime for a few weeks, and with, you know, some success. And by the end of the first week, she's like, "Yep, I lay him down. He might talk to himself for a few minutes, and then he just falls asleep." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." That's amazing. It was
perfect.
so great, and we
Yes.
were immediately able to, like, implement that at home, and I was like, you've done this. This is our first time doing all of these things, but you've done this with probably hundreds of
Mhm.
kids. She's been in the business for like 27 years. So I'm like, we're going to follow your lead on some of these things because you've done it all before with your own kids and with all these daycare kids, and we're still just learning.
Totally.
So that's been hugely helpful on some of those things.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's such a resource to tap into. Absolutely. And so, would you say that the valuable resource of daycare has allowed you to get back to paid work and maintain that balance of identity, maintain that work life, quote unquote, balance? And so, do you feel like there's kind of like a before and after of daycare versus before daycare?
I feel like there is a little bit. Like, I feel like well, that's hard to say because, like, technically we had daycare, but it was all friends and family beforehand. So I feel like I started, kind of regaining my identity, and really getting back into work and enjoying that before he started daycare. But at the same time, having him in formal daycare has really lifted some of like the mental burden because before I would wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh God, who has him tomorrow? Am I dropping him off? Is somebody coming here? Did I check my schedule and make sure I let them know what time they needed to be in? So that I could get to work on time. And so knowing that our schedule is consistent, I drop him off on my way to work between 7 and 7:15, and dad picks him up between 4:15 and 4:45 depending on the day, and that he is always in the same place. And I don't have to think about who's got him, how are we scheduling this, how are our work schedules going to flow around their availability has been hugely helpful and has kind of eliminated that additional worry outside of, just am I doing my job well? Am I being a good mom to him when we are together kind of thing.
Totally, I resonate with that. It's like mental gymnastics
Yeah.
for scheduling the babysitters, and so it's such a blessing to have them, but the mental load is so heavy. So, I think the key that I heard is the ability to have a schedule, a daily
Hmm.
schedule, and so, especially for those moms that are planners like me, we thrive on a schedule, and
Yep.
so I think that's also probably why the beginning part of parenting was so hard because babies don't have a schedule and you're on their schedule, and so that's part of the challenge.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go into the not so glamorous side of daycare, and that is the cost. So I think this will tie in nicely to your part of a small team at work. And so that also came with certain pros and cons when it came to you and your leave. And so talk to me about cost of daycare and the financial impact on your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in the greater Twin Cities area, and I feel like everywhere daycare, first of all, if you can find a spot, you're lucky. And second of all, like it is very, very expensive. So we considered a variety of options when we were looking to place our son in care, and we even considered me dropping down to part time and having a part time nanny or a nanny share situation because we were having such a hard time finding a full time position for an infant, especially at a reasonable cost. So we looked into that, and that was going to be kind of our last resort option because nannies are also very expensive. But we ended up looking at both some centers and a few in homes, and I always felt like I wanted him to be in an in home setting. My mom was an in home daycare provider when I was little. I have a twin sister, and then we have a brother who's 17 months younger than us. And so, obviously, having three kids in less than a year and a half, like that daycare cost was very expensive even back in the 90s. So, my mom opened her own in home. But yeah, we looked at some in homes, and some centers. And I think the most expensive center that we looked at was like $2,500 a month. And I was like, holy smokes, by the time you factor in benefits, taxes, like all of that stuff, I'm like, over half of my take home pay, like with my base salary for a month, is going to go to daycare. I'm like, what's even the point? Like, if I'm going to be going to work for less than minimum wage, essentially. But we met with a few in home providers, and some of them were infant focused. And so they were, a little more pricey as well. And they also, by the time they're 12 to 16 months, you have to find another daycare. So that was not going to be an option for us. And when we found Sue, our current daycare provider, she's got multiple ages of kids, and we just felt like we really clicked with her. And fortunately, because she is in home and she has multiple ages of kids, it's a little more financially appealing. So that it ended up working out. I am not spending half of my take home pay on daycare, which is great, but it is certainly a budget item that we had to consider. And like I mentioned before, my husband transitioned into a new company and a new role, and with that came quite an increase in pay, which is really nice because it has offset our daycare costs for the time being. So we don't necessarily have to make major changes to our lifestyle at the moment just because of that little financial boost. So that's been huge.
Yeah, that's great, and it also is it related to you not having to go part-time as well?
Yes. Yep, 100%. And the part-time thing was something that we considered more so because we were struggling so much to find an infant position. I must have called 25, 30 daycares and I could barely get a call back. And most of the calls back that I did get were, we don't have any openings, or our next infant opening is for the fall of 2024. And this was like the summer of 2023 that I'm making all of these calls. And I was like, well, that doesn't really help me because he won't be an infant anymore at that point. And so that was more of something that we'd considered purely because we didn't think we were going to be able to find full-time care for him, but I still wanted to continue working in some capacity.
Yeah, that I don't know if I have follow-up questions, but I just that is an issue, like, in this country, do you know what I mean? Like, that is not okay that you want to work and you want to go back to work, but you can't find childcare that is affordable and allows you to do so, and so if you didn't find that childcare, it would be forcing you out of work, you or your
Mm-hmm.
husband, but it sounds like in this equation, money-wise, it made sense for it to be you, or
Yep. Yep.
emotionally wise, it made sense to be you. Yeah.
Probably both. Yeah, I have a better appreciation for a lot of my friends who have transitioned into stay-at-home parenting after going through the process of trying to find a good daycare that is affordable and meets our needs.
Absolutely. Okay, so when you were out on leave, how you said you work for a small team and that came with certain pros and cons throughout your expecting leave and return to work journey. So share with me your takeaways of, what was good about being on a small team and what were some of the challenges you had to work through.
Yep. So I work on a small team of 5 full-time employees right now. The owner of our company and myself are the 2 physical therapists. And then we have 2 full-time sport performance coaches. And then our office manager is also a certified athletic trainer. So she does a little bit of clinical work. But yeah, and I'm the only full-time physical therapist. Our owner has a lot of other responsibilities. He obviously runs the business, and so there has always been a lot of pressure on me to meet the needs of all of our physical therapy clients. So I had a lot of anxiety about that heading into pregnancy. I was like, am I, because I've, never been pregnant before. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go from a physical standpoint. I work with athletes and active adults. I am on my feet all day. I am moving. I am demonstrating exercises. I am lugging weights around the gym. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to meet my clients' needs even throughout the pregnancy, let alone while I was away on leave. And I also had a lot of I don't know, I felt like I was abandoning my team and like I was putting so much extra stress on everybody else because I was going to be away. And I know that that's, maybe not a fair way of thinking, like I'm not being fair to myself kind of thing. I've dedicated over 5 years of my life to this team. Everybody knew this was coming kind of thing, but it was still a tough thing. And then there was also the anxiety of, are my clients going to be okay, even though I know Grant is an excellent therapist, but it's like, well, they're used to me, and are they going to still be there when I come back, and some of those things. So that was something that was really tough to work through. And then there was also, the anxiety of the financial impact, not only on myself but also on the business. Like, I'm very emotionally tied to it, and it's like, if I'm not there providing this care, seeing clients, bringing in this income, how is that going to impact the business? Not only for the rest of my team, but also when I come back to work. Are we going to still have the same, numbers flowing in from a client standpoint each month so that we can financially support myself as I come back? So yeah, there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of anxiety around it. And it all worked out. I think it was a pretty high stress time for some of the team members because everybody did, have to kind of step it up a little bit, especially our owner had to take on a lot more of the PT care hours and all of that. And I'm so appreciative of them for taking the reins and, doing such a great job with my clients so that I really could enjoy my leave with my son.
Yeah, so I'm actually one of 8. I work for a very small company, and so I resonate with that. When I was pregnant and trying to plan my leave, it felt like I didn't want to be, like, unloading everything
Yeah.
on everybody else, and so the planner in me was like, "Alright, we gotta have all these plan meetings, we gotta do X, Y, and Z, we gotta prep everything before I'm out, and then, here's the plan for when I'm back," and so I just tried to, like, overplan everything to help everybody. It's an interesting topic to dive into deeper, and it feels like almost a little bit of a touchy topic because I wonder, there's part of you that as an expecting mom, I felt like I wanted to support my teammates and not burden them while I'm out on leave. The other side of me was like, this is the biggest thing to happen to me ever. I've never been pregnant. Things are happening to my body, emotionally, mentally, financially. Like, I am trying to sort all of this out. And so part of me was like, I need my employer and my coworkers to really support me and to feel like I'm part of that community and they're understanding how big of an event this is. And so it's just an interesting pull back and forth. So the optimist in me is like, okay, well, that's like a sense of community almost that you're building with your company. And so I don't know, just I'm just kind of thinking out loud about my experience. What do you think about any of that and the different balances here?
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate how supportive my team has been. But at the same time, like, our owner, he's a parent, but the rest of our team, I guess one of our coaches just turned 30, but the rest of our team is single and in their 20s. And so it's one of those things that it's like they are not in this stage of life. So, they're very, very supportive, but at the same time, like, just don't get it kind of thing, because
Yep.
they have not been through this, aren't thinking about it, and all of that. So it's definitely, in some senses, a little bit isolating, I guess, because it's like I've made this huge transition. I'm a different person than I was before I went on leave. And everybody's used to the old person, and so it's a little bit of a transition for them as well. And it's not necessarily something that you can relate on. You can be supportive and sympathetic and all of that, but you don't really get it until you're a parent yourself, I think. So that's the other interesting aspect of being on this small, overall very young team.
Yeah, it's a reminder to me of small teams are like a mini community.
Oh
And
yeah.
so these big life events are an opportunity to support and thrive and grow and challenge each other as a community. So, okay, awesome. So, I want to make sure we have time for talking about postpartum recovery.
Mhm.
And I'm really eager to get your perspective on this as a healthcare provider. So, talk to me about what you've learned in the postpartum recovery space, both as a provider and as well as through your own experience.
For sure. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and it's one that's been a little bit humbling because I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I feel like I know quite a bit about recovering from pregnancy as a physical therapist and, fitness type person. One of the things that I was very passionate about during my pregnancy was I wanted to stay active because I knew that that was going to help me recover in the long run. And I was lucky that, my pregnancy supported that. And I think that was what gave me the ability to be able to continue to work literally right up until I delivered. The day that I delivered, I came into work, saw a couple of clients, did leg day, went home, ate lunch with my husband, was getting my shoes on for my 38-week appointment, and my water broke. And 7.5 hours later, my son was born. So it was
Oh
very
my
quick. And
god.
it was literally like one of my big fears was I was like, oh my gosh, if my water breaks at work, like I will never hear the end of it. More so from like some of our training clients than from like coworkers or anything like that. But maintaining a certain fitness level, like all the way up to delivery, I think it helped with my delivery. And I do think it helped with my recovery. But at the same time, there was a really big mindset shift that I think now probably a lot of moms go through in some capacity, where it's, there's all this pressure to like bounce back and be, back to all of your activities so quickly. And I felt a certain amount of pressure for that because I'm like, was lifting right up until the day I delivered, and I am in the health and fitness space. I should be able to get right back to stuff, faster than other people because I just I just should be. Like I don't even have a good reason for it. And so following delivery and all of that. And it was the first time that I had taken a significant amount of time off from consistent exercise, probably in my entire life. I was an athlete in high school. I exercised all through college, grad school, young adulthood, really got into weightlifting in my late 20s. So that was weird. And there was a certain like loss of identity with that, but it was also somewhat empowering. I'm like, I am giving my body the break it needs to recover. And one of the things I was very serious about was I was like, I will see a pelvic physical therapist, whether I think I need it or not. I am a huge advocate for it. I'm not a pelvic PT. I work in the sports medicine world, but I refer a lot of people for pelvic PT. And I was like, it's time to practice what you preach. And it was interesting because I saw her at 6 weeks postpartum just for a checkup. I wasn't having any major issues, but she gave me the permission that I needed to continue resting and recovering. At that point, we were going for walks most days, nothing too strenuous. I was doing a few stability exercises on my own, just like some pelvic floor stuff. And one of my questions was, so when can I get back in the gym? And she's like, do you really feel like you're ready to get back in the gym? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I feel like mentally I want to get back in the gym, or I think I should get back in the gym. But I'm like, I was somewhat disconnected from my body, not sure, like, am I physically ready for that? And she's like, I do not want you to do anything more than you're doing until 12 weeks. And it's so funny because I know that in my head, like, it takes 12 ish weeks for most tissues in the body to do their baseline healing. But I know that it is just basic science. But I needed permission from another provider
Mm, mhm.
to let me wait that long, which is just like a really weird, like, kind of mindset thing. I needed that permission. And I feel like in a world where there's so much pressure to get back to the way things were pre baby, I feel like most moms need permission. And I'm in a lot of, mom groups on Facebook and that kind of thing. I think that's how we connected. And it's a frequent question there. It's like, oh, I gotta start losing the weight, or want to get my abs back, or blah blah blah. And it's like, you're 3 weeks postpartum, like you haven't even done the very basics of healing yet. But it's one of those things, it's like I feel like all moms need that permission, and I feel like as healthcare providers we need to be better about like overtly saying that, being like, nope, you need to get back to daily activity. You can do some walks, you can do some really basic stability exercises, but you need really 12 weeks for that body to do the baseline of healing. And then we can start working on transitioning back to bigger activities like lifting weights or running or playing tennis or whatever the case may be.
That is really, really interesting. I love the story you shared because it is true, like, overtly giving
Mm-hmm.
permission does feel like something that I resonate that I needed as well. I also went to a pelvic floor therapist. Cannot say enough wonderful things about that
Amazing.
experience. Like truly, truly. I've been an athlete my whole life, played sports in high school, played sports in college, always been working out, and I have never been connected to my core
Hmm.
as I have been postpartum, like, and going through the pregnancy, learning more about my core, learning what it's connected to. I had a challenging physical
Hmm.
pregnancy because of my core stuff, and so I ended up going to a pelvic floor therapist during my pregnancy and then postpartum, but I can say today, like, I have never been as the mind muscle connection people talk about in fitness, like, I've never been as
Hmm.
connected to my core since going to this pelvic floor therapist. And so it is just
Yep.
life changing as a woman. I feel like it should be standard for postpartum care, truly. So I can't agree with you more. Like, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Molly, so much for sharing. We covered a lot of bases here: daycare, the small team, financial impact of pregnancy, and then the postpartum recovery. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, and we are so thankful that you joined us today.
Thank you for having me.
Moms with Benefits is chasing financial and emotional stability for motherhood. If you've resonated with any of the stories from our moms, we'd love for you to give us a rating and quick review to help spread the word. You'll also find Moms with Benefits on Instagram at momswithbenefits.org. Keep going and keep growing, Mama.